The strongest proof for God has convinced nobody. Most people making this case are operating within a framework that was designed to leak. For years, so was I. Then, while studying probability theory as part of my astrophysics PhD research, I found the structural flaw. Jewish scholars identified it 800 years before the math caught up. Today, in part 2 of the Pesach Proof series, you're going to discover the testimony equation, the principle that I've decoded in Maimonides that reveals why every design argument proves the wrong God. I'm Dr. Yosef Wolf, and my mission is to uncover reality's blueprint by revealing how the physical is rooted in the spiritual. This is part 2 of a 4-part series I'm releasing in the lead up to Pesach. In part 1, I showed how God's opening line at Sinai mirrors the same authentication protocol that secures every device on Earth. Identity outranks content. A sealed dispatch outranks an unsigned one. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it at the end. Today, we go deeper, because the strongest version of the content-based argument, the unsigned letter, has a precise mathematical flaw, and finding it changes how you prepare for the Passover Seder. You've had the conversation, maybe it was at the Shabbos table, maybe over coffee with a colleague, maybe inside your own head at 2 in the morning. You laid out the best case you had. The universe is too precise to be an accident. The constants, the complexity, the staggering improbability that any of this exists without a designer behind it. The person across from you nodded, and then nothing changed. The logic was right. The data was real. Nobel laureates have endorsed the same reasoning. And the scoreboard has barely moved. The fine-tuning argument for God is the most logically airtight case a human being can assemble for a creator. Yet, it has persuaded almost no one. You felt it in real time, not that the other person was dishonest, not that the logic was flawed, something deeper. The reasoning was watertight on paper and weightless in practice. And you walked away wondering whether the problem was the audience or the method. It was the method. There is a precise mathematical reason why the strongest argument for God has converted almost nobody, and has nothing to do with stubbornness or bad faith. It has to do with the principle I call the testimony equation. And every time one deploys a cosmological defense as the primary line of reasoning for the Torah's validity, one is repeating a structural error that has stalled the God debate for centuries. And that's when I found the glitch. The failure runs deeper than most people realize. The strongest version of this proof was not written by a physicist or a philosopher. It was written by one of the greatest Hasidic minds in history in a text studied by tens of thousands of Jews every day. And even that version was never built to finish the job. Here are the 3 clues. Clue number 1, the leak in the logic. The fine-tuning argument fails not because it was wrong, but because of how probability works. In Bayesian statistics, every new piece of evidence updates the odds that a hypothesis is true. You start with a prior, your initial estimate, you encounter new data, and the data shifts your estimate up or down, producing a posterior, your updated belief. This framework exposes the structural leak in every cosmological thesis. When a physicist presents the fine-tuning constants, the numbers are staggering. The gravitational constant, the strong nuclear force, the cosmological constant, the ratio of the electromagnetic force to gravity. The math describes odds against these values aligning by chance that exceed 10 to the power of 229. A rational observer confronting these figures should increase the likelihood that a designing intelligence exists. But here is the framework that also reveals. The data updates the probability of a God. It does not, and structurally cannot, distinguish which God. A deist originator, a pantheist field, a simulation programmer, and a personal cosmic architect. All of them predict the same fine-tuned outputs. In Bayesian terms, the likelihood ratio between these competing hypotheses is exactly 1-to-1. The data moves the needle on existence and leaves the needle frozen on identity. You're hearing those figures and sensing that the logic is airtight. And you're right. But you're also sensing that it won't work on the person you're thinking of right now. You're right about that too. The data proves someone built the house. It cannot tell you who holds the key. We're about to discover what seals the case, and when you see it, the Seder will never feel the same. But first, one more clue. Clue number 2, the most powerful unsigned letter ever written. The Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, composed the most sophisticated version of this reasoning in Jewish history. Shaykhud ve'Amuna, chapters 1 and 2 of the Tanya, he goes far beyond the standard philosophical claim that a fashioned world implies a fashioner. His teaching, rooted in the Baal Shem Tov's reading of Tehillim 11989, is that the divine letters of the 10 utterances must be actively present within every being at every moment. If God withdrew his creative force for even an instant, everything would revert back to absolute nothingness. This is not a God who built a structure and then walked away. This is a God who is sustaining every atom right now. The Alter Rebbe calls this more wondrous than the splitting of the Red Sea. And right about now, something in you recognizes the power of this. You may have learned this text yourself. You may have taught it. But here's the part nobody says out loud. Even this cannot close the equation. A continuous sustaining force proves God is present. It does not prove that God speaks with us. A presence without communication is a life support machine. It keeps everything running, but it has no relationship with the patient. Rebbe's teaching proves that someone is in the room. It still cannot prove that someone is talking to you. Statistically, continuous sustenance updates the odds of a present active God. It still leaves the ratio between God of the Torah and an interpersonal force at 1-to-1. Clue number 3, the one variable that collapses the odds. Here's where the testimony equation resolves what the cosmological thesis cannot. The Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah 8.1 makes a statement so radical that most people read right past it. The Jews did not believe in Moshe because of the signs he performed. Miracles like fine-tuning values are unverified findings. They can be produced by trickery, misinterpreted by observers, and accommodated by competing hypotheses. The Rambam then identifies the one variable that cannot be hacked. The basis of our belief is the revelation at Mount Sinai, where our own eyes saw and our own ears heard. This is not a content upgrade, it is a category shift. Cosmological cases and miracles are Bayesian evidence that update probabilities. A witnessed national revelation is Bayesian proof. It collapses competing hypotheses. When an entire nation witnesses God speak and transmits that account in an unbroken chain, the ratio stops being 1-to-1. It becomes functionally infinite. No rival framework predicts a mass national revelation. This argument has no competitor. Before we get to the convergence, let's revisit the 3 clues. Clue number 1, the fine-tuning argument proves a designer exists, but the Bayesian ratio between competing gods is exactly 1-to-1. Clue number 2, the Alter Rebbe's continuous creation is the most powerful version of this proof ever written, and it still cannot distinguish which god is sustaining the universe. Clue number 3, the Rambam identified the only argument that collapses the odds, a witnessed national revelation that no competing framework can accommodate. Do you see how the pieces are coming together? Here is the convergence. In part 1, we call this the authentication code. Identity outranks content. The testimony equation explains the mathematics underneath that principle. Design-based reasoning is content, brilliant, true, and structurally incapable of resolving the identity question. The Exodus, witnessed and transmitted, resolves it in a single argument. The Alter Rebbe built the most sophisticated unsealed letter in Jewish intellectual history. The Rambam identified the only signature that makes the dispatch binding. The constants are real. The precision is staggering. The fine-tuning thesis is the most elegant letter ever composed. But a letter without a seal is a letter anyone can claim. The seal is Sinai. The witness account is the signature. And that is what we retell at the Seder. I spent years handing people the most impressive unsigned dispatch I could compose. They admired it. They set it down. The moment I stopped defending the structure and started transmitting the witness account, the conversation changed. When a generation stops defending the structure and starts transmitting the witness account, the signal changes. The Seder stops being a ritual and starts being a re-signing of the original covenant. That is what brings the world closer to the moment when the builder does not just sustain the house from behind the walls. He walks through the front door. To see why God's opening line at Sinai mirrors the encryption protocol on every device you own, click here for part 1. And to discover why your teenager's doubt isn't a faith problem, wait for part 3 when it drops next week. If you'd like to dedicate or sponsor one of these classes, click on the link in the description. Thank you for partnering with me as we uncover reality's blueprint together.